All right, so you finally ponied up and got yourself a new ceiling fan and you want to replace your old one. So if you got an old decrepit fan like this and you want to update your living space, stay tuned to this video. I'll show you exactly how easy it is. And get this, you don't need any special tools, and I'll show you guys exactly how you can do it yourself. All right, so you guys got yourself a new ceiling fan and you want to go ahead and install it. So today I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. Follow these steps, you'll get it done in no time. It's a project that I kind of like doing, and I recommend that a lot of DIYers do it themselves. So if you're tired of looking at that old boring ceiling fan that you have, or you have an old light fixture, let's go ahead and get it done, change it out. The good thing about this is you don't really need that many tools. You can probably do it with tools that you have around the house. So you're going to probably need a ladder, a hammer, screwdriver, a drill if you have one. And if you have a multimeter, it would help. If not, you can get by without it. And of course, don't forget your ceiling fan. You're gonna need that. So once you got all these things together and you're ready to start, let's jump into it. So first things first, we wanna make sure all the power is off before we start taking things apart. And there's a few ways to do it when you're dealing with a ceiling fan. The first way, of course, is to just turn off the switch that controls the circuit where your light was or your ceiling fan was. I don't usually recommend this because there may be other live wires in there. So your other alternative is to turn off your breaker. And there are obviously two ways to do it. The old-fashioned way, where you get a helper and you just start turning off breakers until your light goes out or your ceiling fan turns off. Or you can use a circuit breaker tester. If you haven't seen my video on how this works, you can check it out. It's probably somewhere up here. The circuit breaker tester makes it easy because all you got to do is plug in the receiver into your outlet or your light fixture, and then you just scan your breaker panel and it will tell you exactly which breaker corresponds to the fixture or the outlet that you are planning to work on. So now that the power is off, if you have an old light fixture or a fan, now is the time to take it apart. Now to remove the fan, you can do this by removing the screws that hold the cover plate that's covering the wires. As you can see here, the cover plate should slide right off. In most cases, the fan will still be held in place, but in my case, as you can see, the fan was not held in place by the bracket. So I had to kind of hold it in place before I continue disconnecting. But most cases, you should have a bracket that is still holding the fan in place. Once the cover is removed, you can double check to make sure there's no power. I like to use a tester. If you have a multimeter, you can also use it, but you just want to make sure that there's no power just to be safe. Double check. You don't want to get shocked. So once you remove the cover and you double check that there is no power, then you can disconnect the wires. Once the wires are disconnected, you can remove the fan. And if your fan was held in place by a bracket, all you need to do is lift the fan off the bracket. Next, you want to go ahead and remove the old bracket that was holding up your fan. Some people reuse them, but they may not be all cross-compatible, so I like to go ahead and remove it because I'm going to reinstall a new one anyway. They're usually held in place with screws, but in my case, they were actually bolts, so I had to use a socket to take it off. So remove the bolts or whatever it is holding your bracket in place, and you can set your bracket aside. So now that your fan is removed and all the wires are disconnected, you're either going to have one or two scenarios. You're either going to have 3 wires or 4 wires in the box that's in the ceiling. Now, if you have 3 wires, you're good to go. You can move on to the next step. But if you have 4, you want to identify which one of the wires is connected to the switch and which one has constant power, because the one with constant power is the one that you want to use when you install your new ceiling fan. So what I like to do is make sure all the wires are separated, and then I'll turn the power back onto the breaker and I'll test it with either a tester or a multimeter. And what you want to do is you want to check which one of the wires has constant power, and one of the wires should be connected to your light switch. You can have somebody help you by flipping the light switch on and off, and you'll see the voltage go from 120 volts to 0, 120 volts to 0. So you know this one was on your light switch circuit. What I like to do is I'll cap this one and tuck it back in the box, because you won't be using it. You're going to be using the one that has a constant voltage. Side note, you can use the one that is connected to your light switch, but it just means that you have to flip your light switch on and off every time you want to turn your fan on and off. Versus if you have constant power and your ceiling fan comes with a remote, then you can use the remote to turn the fan on and off. If not, you're going to have to leave the light switch on at all times, and you know how that goes. Somebody's bound to turn the light switch off, and then you're gonna have a remote that won't work, and then it's a bunch of problems. So if you got a remote, use the one that has constant voltage. Now let's go ahead and unbox our new ceiling fan, and we want to locate our ceiling fan mounting bracket. It should look something similar to this. It may vary, but it's going to look something like this. You want to set the bracket aside and start assembling the fan based on the instruction manual. Typically, the fan will be comprised of the fan motor, a lighting kit, the shaft, a cover plate, the mounting ball, and it may or may not have a remote receiver. One thing you want to make sure you do is that when you put the cover plate on, you want to make sure that it's installed in the right direction. I don't know how many times I've seen people put it all together and the mounting plate is in the wrong, the cover plate is in the wrong direction, and they got to take the ceiling fan off and take it apart and point it in the right direction. You want to make sure that the larger side is facing the ceiling, because that's what's going to conceal all your wires. You will notice during this install that I didn't install the fan blades, and I did this because in my experience it gets in the way when I'm trying to mount it. So I usually mount the blades last, but if you want to, there's no problem. You can go ahead and mount the blades before you hang the fan. It's no big deal, but I like to do it last. Once you have it all assembled, the hard part is done. Now let's move on to the fun part. So now the next step is to install the mounting bracket on the ceiling. Now it should come with screws that line up with the hole in your ceiling box. In my case, I had bolts that were taken out from the old one, so I'm just going to reuse the bolts to put back up the bracket. Now the most important thing when you're hanging the bracket is you want to make sure that it's level and it's nice and snug to the ceiling. You don't want any play whatsoever in the mounting bracket, because essentially this is what's holding your fan up to the ceiling. So you want it as tight and snug as possible, and level of course. So if you have a remote receiver, now is the time you're going to connect it. So all you need to do is connect the power to your hot wire, the neutral to your white wire, and the ground to your green wire or bare wire, depending on the case. So when you're making your connections, you can use wire nuts, which should have come in the box, or you can reuse the ones from the old fan. And in my case, I'm using the Wago 221 connectors, which make the installation pretty easy. As you can see here, all you need to do is lift up on these levers, slide your wire in, clamp it down, and it's going to make a firm connection on your wires. I like to use these a lot in DIY electrical because they save time, and I know that the connection is pretty secure. I don't have to worry about the wires coming loose. So now that your power wires are connected, the wires that are remaining are the wires that are going to go to your fan, and we'll be putting these on once you mount the fan to the bracket. So now it's time to attach the fan to the mounting bracket. So you want to carefully lift the fan and attach it to the mounting bracket, and all you need to do is slide the ball into the hole on your bracket and make sure that the notch is lined up so that it fits securely in the bracket. I know it seems kind of strange, but this is what actually keeps your fan level and ensures it doesn't fly off the wall. So you want to make sure that the grooves line up, and you'll feel it kind of lock into place once you have it in the right orientation. So now you've made it this far and you're well on your way. And if you found this helpful so far, or anything useful in this content, please guys, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up so it may be helpful to someone else. And if you haven't, consider subscribing to the channel so you may be in the loop when I put out more DIY content. All right, now let's get back to it. All right, once the fan is installed and hanging on the bracket, you'll need to connect the wires from the receiver to the fan and tuck it in the space above your fan bracket. Now this part is a little bit tricky and can be a pain, but just take your time because the space is very tight above the bracket, but the receiver should slide right in. What I like to do is try and tuck the wires away into the box and slide the bracket in first if I can, and then the remaining wires I'll make the connection to the fan. And these wires should be color coded to match the wires that are coming from the fan, and it's sometimes tight like I said, but once you slide the receiver in first with the wires sticking out, then you can make the connection with the wires coming from the fan. Each fan is going to vary, but all the wires should be color coded and you should be able to do it. In my case, it was a plug and play system. A lot of systems come like that. All you got to do is connect it to the wiring harness coming from the fan, but yours may be different. Just check it out, take your time, and you should be good to go. This can be a pain sometimes, but once you get the hang of it, they should tuck away nicely and you'll be ready for the final step. So once you have the wires installed, you can go ahead and slide the bracket trim cover over the wires, and this is what's going to conceal it and make it look nice and neat. You want to get this as close as you can to the ceiling, and there should be some screws that secure it in place that are attached to the fan. Once you have your cover plate installed, some systems you have to line up. There are some screws that are attached to the fan and the holes are in the cover plate. You just line up the holes and kind of twist the cover plate. Twist it a little bit until the screws line up, and then you just tighten the screws down to hold the cover plate back in place. In my case, it came with a rubber boot. I just slide the boot up and it holds it in place. But again, yours may have screws, mine doesn't. So now that you have the cover plate installed, you can go ahead and install the light kit if you didn't install it previously, and the blades if you didn't install it previously. Now, as you can see, and if you did try to do it with the blades installed, you kind of understand what I was saying when it's kind of tricky because the blades get in the way sometimes when you're trying to maneuver up there. The blades are installed by 2 screws on each blade. It may be 3, but they only install one way, and all you got to do is line up the screws, screw in the blades, and that's it. If you tried to install this with the blades already attached, you'll definitely understand why I leave this till the end. So now it's time to turn on the power and make sure that everything is working as it should. You want to test the lights. If they have the dim capabilities, test your remote, test the fan speed. Now, most remotes come pre-programmed from the factory. If yours isn't, chances are there's either a learn button on the remote, and that has to correspond with a learn button on the receiver. But if not, it should work fine. Now, if you were unsure about any of the electrical connections during this install, you can always go ahead and check out my video about basic electrical wiring, where I show you all you need to know about electrical circuits, so you can be a little bit more comfortable if you're tackling a project like this or any other electrical DIY project. And that's it. Now you've installed a brand new ceiling fan in your home. This project may take a little bit of time, but trust me, the end result is so worth it. One of the biggest upgrades you can do to your living space is to upgrade your lighting or put in a new modern ceiling fan. It transforms the space completely. If you have some time, check out some of my other videos about electrical DIY projects around the house. And once again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.